Anyone who doubts the official narrative is cast as a kook, a criminal, a fringe conspiracy theorist, and punished. They've been blacklisted and censored and banned. Even as the leaders who failed to protect our country on 9/11 use these attacks as a pretense to expand their own powers and permanently transform the United States. Over the course of this investigation, we made numerous findings that shocked us, not least of which the apparent role that former CIA Director John Brennan played in helping bring the 9/11 hijackers to the United States, and the remarkable lengths the CIA went to protect the 9/11 hijackers from the FBI.
You had a duty to protect Americans, and you failed because of your fantastical delusion that you could recruit somebody inside the cell.
Tucker Carlson has published the first episode of his 9/11 docuseries, and it is definitely worth watching. Now, the first episode has to do with the CIA's intelligence gathering operation, the lack of communication with the FBI in regard to this operation, and the fact that there were literally 9/11 hijackers in the country that the CIA knew about, and in fact facilitated the travel to the United States. So I didn't know about that until watching this first episode. And I think it was informative. It was backed up by documentation that was provided by Tucker Carlson. Definitely watch it for yourself. I'm going to summarize it here though. Now, according to a description of the episode, rather than inform the FBI, the CIA tried to recruit 2 of the hijackers for a false flag operation, which quickly spiraled out of control. So that's in the description of the YouTube video. So that's a pretty bold claim. We have to admit it's a bold claim, and I was skeptical of it before watching the episode. But he interviewed someone by the name of Mark Rossini, okay? And Mark Rossini, everything he had to say had corroborating documentation that was shared in the episode, and that changed my mind. So before we get into the details, a little more about who Mark Rossini is. So he was an FBI agent from January 1999 to May of 2003. And he worked as the FBI's New York Joint Terrorism Task Force representative at the Alex Station at CIA headquarters. Now, the Alex Station was very specific. It was known as the Bin Laden unit, okay? So the Bin Laden issue station was like a dedicated unit within the CIA that operated from 1996 to 2005. And its sole role, its sole purpose was to track and monitor Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the perpetrators of 9/11. Now, Rossini claims that the FBI did not know that the CIA was allegedly recruiting 9/11 hijackers as informants so they could learn more about Al-Qaeda. And they even approved visas that essentially allowed for these hijackers to travel to the United States, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about this CIA operation, little background on it. Beginning in 1996, the CIA and NSA had been spying on Al-Qaeda through something known as the Hada home in Sana'a, Yemen. So the Hada home is a really important thing to keep in mind here. The FBI nor Mark Rossini were informed about the communications hub for Al-Qaeda that the CIA had discovered and was spying in on. So the Hada home is where they would gather Al-Qaeda terrorists or affiliates of Al-Qaeda. They'd gather there, and the CIA knew about it, and so they were spying in on the Hada home. Okay, so the Hada home was also the physical home of the father-in-law to Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was one of the 9/11 hijackers. Now, at this time, okay, before 9/11 happened, obviously, there was this summit that was to take place. While spying in on the Hada home, the CIA and the NSA learned about a summit that Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists were planning to have in Malaysia. So Kuala Lumpur is where they were gonna have this summit. Now, one of the 9/11 hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar, basically planned to attend by flying from Yemen to Dubai to Malaysia. Malaysia, again, is where they're gonna have the summit. And at this point, the CIA basically intercepts al-Mihdhar once he arrives in Dubai, and they collect a valuable piece of evidence through a search of his hotel room. You're about to hear more about that piece of evidence through Mark Rossini. He's about to explain what that was.
They arranged to search his room and go in. And when they go in, his passport is there, and they take pictures of it or photocopy it. And they send back the imagery. And lo and behold, in his passport is a visa to go to the United States of America, issued out of the American consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
According to one recently released court filings, quote, the visas were issued to facilitate an operation run by the Saudis and the CIA spying operation. The station chief in Riyadh at the time was future CIA Director John Brennan. The CIA continued tracking al-Midhar to Kuala Lumpur, where he met up with other al-Qaeda associates, including Nawaf al-Hazmi, a second future 9/11 hijacker.
So get a load of this. The 9/11 hijackers, there's two of them, were able to get visas from the United States approved by the US consulate in Saudi Arabia. And that's the consulate that was run by John Brennan. So that is an important piece of information that I had heard rumors about it. I hadn't seen anyone provide any hard evidence of it, so I didn't believe it. But the documentation clearly, lays it out. You have Mark Rossini clearly laying it out. And so the way that these hijackers were able to come to the United States legally was through a visa that was provided by the US consulate in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Okay. So here we learned that 9/11 hijacker al-Midhar's passport has a visa to come to the US and that it was issued by that US consulate. Then the CIA headquarters in Kuala Lumpur spied in on the Malaysia summit, where you have these al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists attending, and reported back to the Alex station in the United States, where Mark Rossini was operating out of. Now, Rossini's FBI colleague, a guy by the name of Doug Miller, approaches him about the CIA cable, because they received that cable from the CIA. That's good. You want that to happen. And tells Rossini that they need to inform the FBI bureau about it, right? They need to let the FBI bureau know that this US Saudi intelligence operation is taking place. Rossini agrees. How could he not? Now, Doug Miller writes what's known as a CIR. That's a Central Intelligence Report. And Rossini approves it. And he's ready to send it over. It goes to the desk of CIA analyst Michael Ann Casey. And here's what happens next, according to Rossini.
And it sits in her queue, her electronic queue, and it doesn't move for like a day or two. It should move in hours. I'll never forget, like it was yesterday. I'll never forget. I standing over her. I said, hey, Doug's CIR. It's got to go to the FBI. He said, no, it's not. I said, well, why not? She said, because it's not FBI, not an FBI matter. It's an FBI matter. She said, it's a CIA matter. And when and if we want the FBI to know, we will tell them. And you are not to say anything. I said, but they got a visa to come to the US. She said, no, we're handling it. And when we want to tell the FBI, we will. Now, in my naivete, I believed her. And I have to live with that every day of my life, that I believed her.
I can't imagine living with that kind of guilt, but clearly Rossini feels a lot of guilt over the fact that he followed orders and did what the CIA told him to do. So the CIA blocked the FBI detail at Alex Station, Rossini, from informing the FBI bureau, which is pretty insane, but okay. Then two of the 9/11 hijackers make their way to the United States. Take a look.
On January 8th, 2000, CIA surveillance teams reported that al-Midhar had boarded a flight to Bangkok, Thailand. He was accompanied by a man they identified as al-Hazmi. According to the official account, this is where the trail went cold. The CIA placed their names on a watch list and asked that Thai authorities track their movements. 3 months later, the Thai government reported back. Al-Hazmi had boarded a United Airlines flight to Los Angeles. Al-Midhar was with him. The two hijackers had arrived in the United States.
You have the CIA then following one man and then two men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? Landing in Los Angeles, California, and you don't tell the FBI.
Guys, that's insane. That really is insane. Because think about it, the FBI investigates issues within the borders of the United States. The FBI should know about it. So why the hell would the CIA try to block the FBI bureau from learning about this CIA operation, learning about the fact that Al-Qaeda terrorists were being allowed into the United States, okay? Wouldn't it be helpful considering that Al-Qaeda operatives would be here on domestic soil and the FBI is tasked with investigating and spying on potential terrorists and criminals within US borders? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, you're about to hear from former White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke on what he was told in a newly released document. Take a look.
According to a recently released court filing, former White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke told government investigators that the, quote, CIA was running a false flag operation to recruit the hijackers.
When Cofer Black became the head of the counterterrorism center at CIA, he was aghast that they had no sources in Al-Qaeda.
After Clarke made that claim publicly, he received an angry call from former director of the CIA, George Tenet, who did not deny the allegations made by Mr. Clarke, end quote. But when we reached out to Tenet, his spokesperson denied that the CIA was recruiting hijackers, calling it false rumors and saying, quote, that's categorically not true. He also recalled that the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow, blocked the commission's investigation into the matter at the behest of Condoleezza Rice.
Okay, that's amazing. So you have George Tenet throwing Condoleezza Rice under the bus. But to be sure, the 9/11 Commission's report does not include anything about this clandestine CIA intelligence gathering operation. So again, to recap, the CIA director, George Tenet, excoriated Clarke, that's the counterterrorism czar, for disclosing what he was told about the CIA intelligence gathering operation, but he did not deny it in the email that he sent to Clarke. This would be something that the 9/11 Commission would want to investigate, right? But the commission's director, Philip Zelikow, blocked the investigation into this, according to Tenet, at the behest of then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. So as a result, the official 9/11 report from the 9/11 Commission does not even mention the CIA's plan to recruit the hijackers as CIA informants into Al-Qaeda. So we don't even know who, so we don't even know who that person is, by the way. Okay, so the CIA blocked the commission from investigating the CIA operative who was attempting to recruit the hijackers. We don't know who that CIA operative is because in all the documentation, that person is simply referred to as VVV. So that person's name is redacted. And one of the arguments that Tucker Carlson makes is we should have some transparency and we should know more details about who the CIA operative was because this seems like a pretty big deal. And we just, at this moment, don't know. The commission's investigators also did not ask CIA Director George Tenet about the Al-Qaeda summit in Malaysia or why the CIA blocked the FBI from being warned about what they were doing about this whole operation, the fact that there were two Al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States with the CIA's help and acknowledgement. So hijackers in the US, let's talk about them a little more. So while in the US, the 9/11 hijackers, that's Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar, lived in plain sight, as Tucker Carlson says in this episode, because they didn't hide their real names. They were living out in the open using their actual names. They were even listed in the San Diego phone book. They lived in San Diego for more than a year before the 9/11 attacks even happened. Also, when they arrived to the US, they met up with a Saudi man by the name of Omar al-Bayoumi at a cafe in Los Angeles. So the CIA was using al-Bayoumi to spy for them and gather intelligence on the hijackers because again, at the time, the CIA was not allowed to engage in domestic spying. So they essentially used this Saudi as their proxy to do the spying for them. And here's a little more about this Omar al-Bayoumi guy.
Bayoumi's notebook, which was uncovered when British law enforcement raided his home in the UK, contained a drawing of an airplane and mathematical calculations related to flying it. The 9/11 Commission investigators never saw this. At the time, al-Bayoumi had a no-show job at a Saudi aviation contractor called Avco. The company's employees say he was one of roughly 50 ghost employees working there at the time, taking the paycheck but never coming to work. According to declassified government documents, an investigator from the 9/11 Commission said al-Bayoumi was receiving substantial sums of money from the Saudi embassy in Washington prior to the 9/11 attacks, that the money was being funneled from accounts at Riggs Bank in Georgetown belonging to Haifa bin Faisal, the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the United States. By using the Saudis as a proxy to recruit the 9/11 hijackers, the CIA gave itself cover. If things went wrong, they could push a narrative that blamed the Saudi government for the attacks, which is what they did.
Now, in addition to that, al-Bayoumi convinced the hijackers to move to San Diego. He co-signed on a lease to an apartment for them. He even paid their first month's rent and security deposit. He got them bank accounts, driver's licenses, and introduced them to other radical Muslims in the area, including Anwar al-Awlaki, who later was assassinated in a drone strike by the Obama administration, even though he was a US citizen and had the right to due process, but nonetheless, he was killed. Just really interesting stuff. So at one point, al-Madar was able to exit and re-enter the United States because he was issued a multi-visit visa by the US consulate. So he traveled to Yemen to see the birth of his daughter, I believe. Birth of a child. I can't remember if it was a daughter or not, but nonetheless, just a few days before he re-entered the United States, though, and he re-entered through JFK in New York, the FBI and CIA had actually met to discuss the bombing of USS Cole, which al-Madar was actually involved in. So the bombing of that military ship killed 17 US soldiers. The FBI had a picture of al-Madar that was taken at the summit in Malaysia. The agent asked the CIA if they knew who the man was, and the CIA refused to tell him. That's crazy. Or tell them, I should say. So it wouldn't be until August of 2001 that the CIA finally alerted the FBI about what was going on. But by that point, it was too late. Obviously, soon after that, September 11th happened. And so the theory is that the CIA operation spun out of control. However, the FBI had its own failures. The theory is that the CIA operation had spun out of control. But the FBI also, I want to be clear, had their own failures. So take a look at this. What you're looking at, when al-Hazmi and al-Madar were in California, they spent some time living with an FBI informant by the name of Abdu Sattar. Now, Carlson claims that somehow the FBI was never informed about this. Okay, so like there was definitely a breakdown in communication in some cases, but most of the time, my read of what was disclosed in this first episode was that the CIA was engaged in an operation that they were very much intentionally hiding from the FBI. And as a result of giving these two al-Qaeda terrorists access to the United States with these visas, the ability to travel to the US, this was all an attempt to gather information, to use them as informants and gather information about al-Qaeda. Obviously, that operation has backfired. But there's still so much that we don't know because there are documents that are being withheld from the American people, even though 9/11 happened 24 years ago. And at this point, I think we're deserving of a little more transparency and a little more clarity of how the largest terror attack on US soil was able to occur. Considering the fact that we have 1 billion intelligence agencies, you have all this, surveillance in America. So I thought that this was definitely an enlightening episode, to say the least. And there's more detail that you should look into. I can't get into every single minor detail that was covered in this episode, but I thought that this was telling. And I think that the CIA has a lot to answer for. Now, as it pertains to the 9/11 Commission, it was pretty much set up to fail. It was underfunded. And as you can tell, they were kind of led astray in that they weren't given all the information they needed from our own intelligence organizations. But it was an eye-opener, and I recommend taking a look at it. I'm not saying that, the United States intentionally planned a terror attack in the US and it was an inside job in that way. I'm just saying that there were some pretty big missteps and some really bad ideas carried out by the CIA as it appears. And we haven't really gotten many answers about why this happened and why no one was held accountable for it. So take a look at the episode for yourselves. That's all I have to say about it. There are going to be several more episodes coming out in subsequent weeks, and I'll decide whether we cover every single one. But I thought this one contained some information that was worth knowing about.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.